Chapter 10, Part 2, Sanctuary. The great eye of the desert was an unending plain of pebbles. With almost no exceptions, the terrain never changed. It was monotonous and predictable, until now. Her camel stood on the edge of a cliff. The ground dropped below her, almost straight down. 500 feet below her was a green valley filled with trees and grass. Elizabeth could see sheep grazing in the distance. There were pools of water and little streams. In a few places, water cascaded down the cliffs in picturesque falls. It was beautiful, unbelievably beautiful. Elizabeth was so surprised by the sight, she gasped. Jankar laughed and cooed. "It's beautiful, is it not?" Zet asked her as he walked up beside her. "And it's all ours." He walked forward to be with his men who were standing at the edge of the cliff. Elizabeth had a sudden thought. She grabbed her locket and popped it open. The right-hand side had those funny squiggles. The bottom was shaped like a C. The cliff she was standing on looked like that. In the distance, maybe a mile away, the canyon's face was broken up into little canyons. They looked a lot like M's and V's. She supposed they were little canyons. Elizabeth had seen pictures of the Grand Canyon on our world that resembled this. On the top of the locket, the funny squiggles were broken into a little M. She looked at her locket again. It was a map of the canyon before her. There was a funny little line that went towards the locket's edge. It started in one of those V's. Elizabeth suspected it was a route out of the canyon. From the map, she guessed it started to her left or south and wandered southwest. It intersected with another line that had X's on it. Elizabeth figured it out. The line intersected with the harem trade route. There were hundreds of little canyons over there, but she had hope now. The men urged the last two camels down a steep trail to the valley floor. As Elizabeth pulled Jankar back into the camel tent, the sun sank down below the horizon. Her camel growled and complained as it lurched down the trail. Mitha would be scared by the new environment, but Elizabeth was excited. For the first time in a long time, she had hope. Escape was now possible. Zet's very tired group took an hour to reach the valley below. Elizabeth watched through her curtains. She was memorizing where things were and possible hiding places. It was a skill Josh and Zithny had drilled into her. Lord Theron may have had a part as well. Zet led them toward the southwest, or her left, toward a corner of the valley. The air actually smelled moist. It had been so long since she had felt humidity. They stopped in front of a large building, about the size of a hacienda in our world. Elizabeth's camel thumped as it sat down. Zet's head popped into her tent. "Get out," he ordered. Elizabeth looked up to see the dark cliffside about half a mile in front of her. Above its impenetrable black, the night sky shone with brilliant stars. In the distance, she could hear a donkey braying. Jankar wiggled in her arms. It was past his bedtime, but the newness and the smells of the valley kept him awake. His little eyes tried to look everywhere at once. "You've been a good servant, Mitha," Zet told her grudgingly. Mitha curtsied. Elizabeth wanted to kick him for being condescending. "The baby's healthy, but he needs fresh air and sunlight. Starting tomorrow, you may wander the valley. There's no escape from our little secret, as I'm sure you saw," he told her. "My lord wishes him to be kept healthy. You may tether your goats in this pen," he showed her where he meant. "One of my men will dump feed for them at night. In the morning, you can milk them here. You will be watched at night, however." "When can I meet this great lord?" Mitha asked in her most amazed voice. Mitha, you are an unimportant servant. He is a busy man. Just keep the harem of harems baby happy," Zet scowled at her. "Besides, you need a bath first. There are several pools on the edges of the cliff. Make sure you use one tomorrow, and don't drown." "Yes, sir," Mitha said humbly. It wasn't likely she would drown. Swimming was her favorite sport. Elizabeth learned it many years ago at the Y, but she doubted he would understand. Zet led Elizabeth into the castle. A staircase led up to an upper floor. He walked past the stairs and led her down a hall to a little room. The man from the hacienda came and stood outside the door. Elizabeth could see he was white. He was certainly no harem. Zet let her walk into the room and then slammed the door behind her. The room had a rough blanket and a pallet to lie on. Elizabeth sniffed the blanket. At least it smelled clean. Above the window was a window with bars. The bottom of the window was almost as high as she could reach. She placed Jankar on the pallet and grabbed the bars. Huffing and puffing, she pulled herself up to where she could see out. In front of her were the dark cliffs and the sky. In the morning, she would have an excellent view of the cliffs. All this only took a few minutes. When she was done checking out the window, she went to the door and pushed on it. The door swung open. The white man was standing right there. She closed the door as he glared at her. A more close examination of the room showed a pitcher of water, which she eagerly took a drink from. Then she lay down on her new bed. Elizabeth curled up next to Jankar. She sang lullabies to him. Her warm body was making him sleepy. The clean, not gritty blanket helped too. Elizabeth was happy she didn't have to share it with a goat. She itched a spot on her back. Great, she muttered to herself and Jankar. I can finally get rid of the goats, and now I have fleas. Jankar just laughed in his baby way. Cousin Mitha was so funny sometimes. In the morning she sat up and looked around. She waited for a few moments. When no one entered, she pushed the door open and walked into the hall. The guard was gone. Elizabeth wandered down the entrance she had come in. Zet was waiting for her. He had food for her to eat and some fabric in a basket. It was very fine material. Elizabeth remembered Uncle Eugen saying harem were stealing from each other on the trade route. She suspected this was stolen from some honest merchant. Your clothes are terrible, Zet told her. Make some clothes for you and the baby. I could have told you that, idiot, Elizabeth thought. Yes, sir, Mitha said. Elizabeth carried the basket of cloth, some goat cheese and bread in one arm, and Jankar on the other. She brought one of the goats along for Jankar's breakfast. Besides, she liked goats so much. Bah, it said. Elizabeth walked slowly. She hadn't been allowed to exercise much and was out of shape. She found one of the ponds up against the cliffs. She put her toe in the pond. The water was pleasantly cool and felt ever so clean. She couldn't remember the last time she had a bath. The day of Brendan's night was probably when she had one. She was going to walk right in when Jankar started to cry. He was about 6 months old now, and he was hungry. At least that's what Elizabeth thought. She had kind of lost track during the long journey. Some of the days she had been so depressed that she hadn't noticed much. She had been much more Mitha than Elizabeth then. Elizabeth sighed, grabbed her cup and a spoon, and milked the goat. At least the swish, swish of the milking quieted him down. Jankar liked that particular sound. After Jankar was done drinking, she offered him a tiny piece of her flatbread. Jankar put it in his mouth and gummed on it for a few moments before spitting it out. The look of disgust on his face was priceless. Not ready for solids yet, huh? She asked with a laugh. Aren't you supposed to start teething soon? Jankar just gurgled at her. Elizabeth just laughed at him. No, little buddy, we're going for a swim. Don't freak on me. You haven't had a bath in half your life, literally. Bah, Jankar said. Bath, Elizabeth said. She slid into the water with him in her arms. He looked startled for a moment and then laughed some more. She waited around making bubble sounds for an hour. Jankar tried to make the sound too. She used his scrungy shirt to wash him up. After that, he got sleepy. Elizabeth put him on the grass under a willow tree. The goat lay next to him. Then Elizabeth dove back into the pond. She used the sand to scrub clean. She tried it with her clothes, but they were pretty hopelessly dirty. She finally hauled out of the pool. She decided to let her clothes drip dry on her. The air was already warm and would be hot by lunchtime. Elizabeth plopped down against the willow tree. Jankar was still asleep, so she wanted to get some work done on the clothes. Elizabeth had no idea if Mitha could sew, but she could. Zithny had hauled her to a homeschool home economics class for weeks. She had learned to make a decent stitch. When she lived in Bithnyia, Aunt Melanie told her proper ladies knew how to sew. For some reason, Zithny had a coughing attack just then when her aunt said that and went for a walk. It was only later that Elizabeth realized her mom's sewing was pathetic. It was very pleasant at the pond, Elizabeth thought.